other will appreciate and approve of. So, our topic today is love in action. Love in action. We are completing the month of February. Can you believe we are completing the month of February? Oh my God. But we are completing the month of February today, and all you need is love has been our theme all month long. And today we're talking about love in action. And this is going to seem like a bit of a non sequitur, but I took most of my talk today from this book called Spiritual Economics. Now, what does spiritual economics have to do with love in action? This book is a classic, and I think the reason that it's a classic, Eric Butterworth's Spiritual Economics, is because it's not about money. It's about love. It's about love and spirit in action in the world, and the way we see that most obviously is through money, through our financial interactions, and we can recognize our, I'm on. Eugene's giving me the high side. I'm on. Okay. I'm on, ladies and gentlemen. I'm on. So we can see our relationship to ourselves, to our source, and to love by our relationship with money. Money is maybe the most concrete and complex way that we see love in action. So all of these principles come from spiritual economics, but we really are talking about love. Because the thing that Butterworth says is that we have to show up, and what we get back in life is what we give out. It's where we come from, not what we want, that is attracted to us. So if we come from a place of not enough, there's not enough love, I don't have enough, nobody loves me enough, I need validation, support, any sort of needy energy, then we don't get what we want. Because we aren't coming from that knowingness that we are one with the divine and we have all we need. I frequently think about this in regard to money because I always think, well, if only I had more money, I could do X. And the reality is if I would just do X, the money would come. But we use that as a reason to hold ourselves apart. So love in action in the world is when we show up as love. We show up as that point of divine clarity, that point of divine heart, that point of divine energy. No matter what else is going on, no matter what we think we need, when we show up as love in action in the world, we are spreading that, and then we are actually creating more. We are paving the way for more of that divine life to flow through us and flow through the experience of everyone we know and come into contact with. So how do we do that? The first thing we have to do is we have to see differently. We have to see differently. I heard a speaker today, this last week I was at the Centers for Spiritual Living's annual convention, and there was a speaker who used this quote. I heard Wayne Dyer use it. I heard it attributed to a million different people. Change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. You guys probably all heard some version of that. Change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. When we see through the eyes of love, we see differently. And when we consciously see differently, then our whole attitude about things change. There's a great story from the Abraham Hicks teachings, if you know them at all. Esther Hicks, who is a channeler, she channels this non-physical entity called Abraham. She's, I don't know how old she is, she's in her late 70s, and she went to get her driver's license renewed, and she went to take the eye test, and she couldn't see the little chart. And she said to the lady behind the counter, she said, "This thing's broken." And they were shocked. And they said, "No, I think you need to go change your prescription on your glasses, go get glasses, and come back and try it again." And she stepped back for a minute, and in her head she said, "Abraham, can you see this?" And she leaned forward again and read it perfectly. Abraham's not out there. Abraham is their term for that non-physical energy that flows through all of us. They've given it a name, but we all have that. She took her human self out of the way, saw through the eyes of the divine, and read the chart. Now, my beloved, of course, said, "God, I'd hate to be on the road with you when Abraham's not present." That's the point. That divine life is always present. It is always there with us. It is only when we put up our own barriers visualization. You all know how when we see things differently, things out here change. And the great example of that, you've probably heard this story before, but I love it, comes from the U.S. Olympic basketball team. The U.S. Olympic basketball team had a practice, and they measured the accuracy rates on free throws of the team as a whole. And they sent them away for the week, but they divided them into 3 groups. The first group, they said, don't do anything. Don't practice. Don't think about basketball. Just take the week off. The second group, they said, we want you in here every single afternoon practicing free throws. Just keep throwing free throws, keep throwing free throws. And the third group, they said, don't come to the gym, but for 1 hour every day, we want you to visualize throwing free throws and getting them in. Just take an hour every day and visualize it. So a week comes back, and or a week later, they all come back, and the first group that did nothing, their accuracy had declined, as you would imagine. The second group that was actually in the gym throwing free throws every day had a 24% improvement from the previous week on their free throw rate. None of that surprising. Here's the one. The one that didn't touch a basketball all week long, just did it in their mind, had a 23% improvement rating on their free throw percentage, doing nothing but seeing the outcome that they wanted. So when we want to be love in action in the world, we have to see differently. We have to see love. Sometimes we have to look for it. We have to look for it differently. We have to be proactive rather than reactive. We can't wait until someone loves us to love them back. We may have to love them first. We may have to see through whatever junk, that's a spiritual term, whatever junk is in the way to find that love. But when we see differently, we will experience and express love in action. The second thing we have to do, this should be no surprise, if there's anybody in this room who has never heard this before, don't tell me, because it will just disappoint me. But the second thing we have to do is we have to be grateful. Is this news to anyone? Of course. But we have to be grateful. I have a minister friend who says, pray for what you want and give thanks for whatever shows up. Because if you pray for $1 million and what you get is a bill for $20,000, what that is an expression of your consciousness. And so be grateful that now you have been given the opportunity to examine what's there, to take a look at it so that you can go deeper into understanding, because the truth is the $1 million is there. We aren't at a place where we can receive it. We aren't a vibrational match to it. We don't have the consciousness or the container to hold it. And so we can be grateful for whatever shows up, because now we know where we need to work on, what we need to work on, where we need to focus our energy. So we need to be grateful. In the Bible, when Jesus has the story of the loaves and fishes, does anybody remember this? What he does first when a little boy, so there's 5,000 people there, and a little boy offers his lunch, and it's 5 loaves and 2 fishes. You remember the first thing Jesus does? He gives thanks. He doesn't look at it and go, are you kidding me? There's 5,000 people here. How are we going to feed all these people with just 2 fishes and 5 loaves? He gives thanks. But more importantly, he looks away. He looks up. Not that God is up there. He's looking away from the condition down here on the ground. He's turning away from the condition of 5,000 people in front of him with 2 fishes and 5 loaves. He looks up and he gives thanks. And there were 12 baskets left over at the end of the day. That's how the gratitude works. There's a story of a couple going to see a friend in New York City. And the person who lived in New York City knew that this couple was from a smaller town, was a little nervous about coming to the big city. And so the very first thing that the guy did who lived in New York was, as soon as they arrived, he took them up to the top of the Empire State Building and showed them the big picture, showed them the whole expanse of Manhattan, and showed them where Central Park was and all the boroughs, and showed them, the different rivers, And then, throughout the course of the week on their visit, every time he took them somewhere, he'd give them a sense of how it fit in to that big picture. And they loved everything. They never once commented on dirt or graffiti or crime or anything. They just loved it because they saw the big picture. That big picture is God's view. That big picture is God's view. When we have things happen to us and we feel like we can't be grateful for it, it's because we are seeing the condition. And if we can just step up and be grateful, we get to see the bigger picture. That's what gratitude does. It allows us to say, there's something going on here that I don't understand. But I'm going to give thanks because I know that that divine power and presence is always working for me, never against me. And so if it looks like it's against me, I just don't have a big enough picture right now. I can't see the whole story. So I will transcend, I will look up, I will turn away from the condition and rise above so that I can see that bigger picture. And that's how being grateful shifts us from a place of not enough to that place of knowing that we are always cared for. One of the stories Butterworth tells in the book is of a missionary. And he was really interested, this is in the Amazon River Basin, because this section of the Amazon River Basin, there were all these tribes and they were flourishing. I mean, this is the Amazon. There's plenty of wildlife and game, and the river is running with fish, and there's some agriculture, and everything grows, and all of these tribes are prospering, except for one. There's one tribe that is constantly in poverty. High infant mortality rates, high disease rates, all the things that we associate with poverty. This missionary couldn't figure it out, so he decided to study them because he's so fascinated why all of this region is thriving except for this one tribe. He studies them for 3 years, and at the end of 3 years, he figures it out. There was no word in their language for gratitude. That was the only difference. That was the only thing he could find. They had no way to give thanks for the bounty around them. And so they continued to focus on the not enoughness and the smallness and the lack, never being able to shift their heart to that place of love where they knew that they were cared for by that divine creator. So be grateful. Now, grateful is a feeling. It's not an intellectual checklist. I've done that in my own life. Oh, let's check off all the things that I can be grateful for. Don't feel it at all. I usually actually do it with quite the air of pisiosity, trying to change my. Okay, yes, I'm grateful that I have a house. Okay, yes, I'm grateful that I have a car. Okay. That's not exactly the same as being grateful. Being grateful is getting in touch with that place within us where we can actually feel grateful. Whatever it is, even if you can just feel grateful that the sun is shining today, or that, we live in this beautiful place, or whatever it is, however low you have to set the bar to feel the gratitude, get to the feeling place of it, and then everything else opens up and expands. So be grateful. And then the third thing is give unconditionally. Give unconditionally. I want to talk a little bit about tithing. We talk about tithing. Tithing is 10%. Now, this comes from a quote in the Bible, Malachi. I have the exact site right here. Malachi 3:10. Before you guys all get your resistance up, I'm not going to tell you should tithe because Butterworth actually doesn't believe in tithing. So everybody take a big old deep breath. This is not a pitch for money. Okay? Malachi 3:10. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be enough room to store it. That's where the Christian version of tithing comes from. But every major religion has some idea about giving, and giving unconditionally, whether it's tithing, the actual 10%, or some other number. Now, what Eric Butterworth says, and I had to actually kind of threw me for a loop, I had to stop and think about it. He says this is written in the section of the Bible where they're explaining Levitical law. Okay? He says this is spiritual immaturity. This is like telling your teenager that they have to be in at 10 o'clock because they don't have enough sense yet to know that if they stay out late, it's not good for them. But as they mature, They understand that if they stay out too late and they have to get up early the next morning, it's not going to be good, and so they make the choice on their own. And so Butterworth points out that in the New Testament, the 3 times that Jesus talks about tithing, he's not complimentary of it. One is when he talks about the man who tithes in public and makes a big deal of it, but then doesn't live a virtuous life. He says, so when you give go into the closet and give in secret. The other one is the money changers in the temple. Right now, I'm forgetting the third one, but there were 3 by the book, it'll tell you. And so what's this about? New Thought says all the time, you should tithe, you should tithe, you should tithe. For those of you who took either Prosperity Plus or Financial Freedom, I said, I used to have people call me and say, well, it's a question of tithing or paying my house payment. I don't want to get in trouble with you for not tithing, but that's not the point. The point is give unconditionally. Give because you're so grounded in that nature of love that you know that you always have enough. Give because it's an outpouring of your belief that you are supported and loved by the divine intelligence that created you. And you know that regardless of the circumstances, if you don't look like you have enough in your checkbook, but you give from that place of knowing that that will change, then it will change. And that's why you hear the miracle stories about tithers. Not because they sat down with great grudgingness and fear and desperation and wrote out a check for 10% thinking that would be the magic bullet to the get-rich-quick scheme. It's because they transcended the condition. Like Jesus looking away from the loaves and fishes, they looked away from the checkbook and said, I know this is an abundant universe and I'm going to bring myself into alignment with it by getting myself into that feeling place of giving unconditionally, even though the condition says I can't afford it. I'm going to give unconditionally and I'm going to write that check anyway. And then you hear the stories. I have a great story of a woman who came up to me after a talk 2 years ago now. The title of my talk had been Faith, Trust, and Pixie Dust. And that's a different talk. You'll hear it another time. But anyway, it was a great talk. And she had been in the room. 6 months later, I'm invited back to speak at the same center. And I give my second talk. Fabulous as well, you know, of course. But afterwards, this woman comes up to me and she says, I was in the audience 6 months ago when you spoke, and you talked about this very thing. Talked about having the faith to step out, and that when we step out, the universe meets us more than halfway. I said, yes. And she said, I have a story to tell you. I had $42 in my checkbook when you said that. But I felt so certain that I had to act in faith that I wrote a check for $40 to the church. She said, my partner and I went home, we were scared to death. We did, but we felt it. We were willing to have the faith. We wanted to give unconditionally because that's how we defined ourselves. We were givers. The next day, Monday morning, she got notified that a legal battle that had been going on for 18 years had been found in her favor, and she got a check for $145,000. 18 years this legal battle had been going on. And she found the place within her. This is not about the $40 check, people. This is about her finding the place within her to give unconditionally, even though the condition said she couldn't afford it. And that shifted those universal tumblers that guide our lives to make way for this check that had probably been waiting 17 and a half years to come to her, for her to have that realization that she could be love in action. She gave first, and then it opened up. And then here was the thing that really touched me. She showed me her arm, and she had tattooed on her arm, Faith, Trust, and Pixie Dust. Oh. That's when I went, oh. And then you don't have to stop giving at a certain number. That's the other thing about the 10%. You don't have to stop there. William Colgate, you might have heard of the little company that he founded. William Colgate, you know, Colgate. When he left his home in Baltimore in the middle of the 19th century, 1800s, to go to work in New York, he was going to go find his fortune in New York. A friend of his pulled him aside and said, remember, take the Lord into partnership on everything you do. So William Colgate started working in a soap factory. Always gave 10%, 10%, 10%. When he went out to start his own company, Colgate Soap, he decided that he wanted to give more. So he gave 20%. and he prospered. And the more he prospered, the more he upped the percentage. So then he gave 30%, and the money kept coming in greater and greater amounts. He got to the point where, until the day he died, he gave 50% of his income away every single time he got something, because he got it. He couldn't outgive God. But what he could do is he could bring himself into alignment with that principle that he was the love. It's not out there and he's trying to gather it to him in that fearful little way we do of there's not enough. He generated it. He was the creator of it. And by giving, he put his money literally where his mouth is and said, I am love in action. I am love in action, and I will show you. Here's money. He founded Colgate University. He found, with his money, he founded several nonprofits. All because he knew that he was love in action. So how do we show up as love in action? We have to shift, and this is hard because all of the signals around us are the human existential experience that there's a little bit of good, and I got to work really hard for it, and once I get it, I got to hold on to it. I got to guard my heart because people are going to hurt me. They could hurt me, and so I'm not going to show up as that big, beautiful, bright thing that is love, that is giving. I got to protect myself. But that's not the truth. And the more we live that way, the more we attract more of that. We attract people who believe that same way, so then we can point to all of our groups of friends and go, look, I'm not the only one. Everybody I know thinks this way. Right. Exactly. If you look for evidence, you will find it. If you look for it. But if we can see differently, if we can stop and see from that bigger perspective, you know, those bracelets for a while, WWJD, what would Jesus do? Okay, so maybe not. But what would God do? What would God do? Would God say, oh, I don't know if I can afford it right now? Would God say, you know what, you hurt me 10 years ago, so I don't really want to talk to you? No. So if we can see differently, raise our perspective and see the way God sees. And then if we can be grateful, because once we see differently, we get this bigger picture, and so of course we can be grateful. Of course we can see the magnificence of everything that has been given to us. So then we can be grateful for everything, even if it doesn't show up the way our small human minds think it should. How many times have you guys had something that you really wanted, the opposite happened, and 10 years down the road, you could see that that was actually the very best way for you to get what you really wanted, but you couldn't have seen it at the time. Right? I think we all have some sense of this. So now, the trick is to be grateful when that thing happens and go, oh, it doesn't look like what I want, but I bet down the road I'm going to be really happy about this. So I'll give thanks now. Be grateful. See differently, be grateful. And then, give unconditionally. Because that's your affirmation that there's always enough. And I don't care if it's money or time or love, you always get back in the arena where you give. So if you are a big giver of money, you will get more money. We, if we aren't there, tend to look at that and go, oh, sure, well, I'd give 50% of my income if I make that much money. That's backwards. You'll never make that much money if you don't give of your income. Ever. You may say, I don't know how this is going to work, but think about the lady with $42 in her checkbook. Again, it wasn't about the dollars. It was about her stepping out in faith. God's going to take care of me. God's going to provide. So give unconditionally. And when we do that, we can be love in action in the world. So I stand here recognizing that each person here today is a powerful and dynamic expression of love in action. I know that each one of us is an emanation of that divine love, of that life, of that power, of that presence of spirit that always has enough, is always giving, is always calling us to see from a bigger perspective. one of us here that no matter what we've been told, no matter what we think we've learned in the course of our life, no matter what has happened to us, there is that within us that has never been damaged, can never be diminished, that is connected to that one life, that one power, that one presence, and truly is filled with love. And so I know for each one of us that we leave here today and we go out into our lives as love in action. This shows up as being unconditional in everything we do. We look away from the world of conditions. We see without seeing the conditions. We give thanks regardless of the conditions. And we give regardless of the conditions. Because Ernest Holmes says that this is how we express and experience God. We turn away from the condition and we know the higher truth about ourselves and about our lives. So I accept that this love in action flows through us, that by doing this we are the pebble in the pond of consciousness. We create a world that works for everyone as we step into that divine flow and recognize that we are truly blessed. And so as we leave this sanctuary, we take this knowing with us. We take it with us through this day and this week and indeed the rest of our lives to know that we are one with that power and presence. We are one with as much love as we ever need. And so recognizing this, I just give thanks. I give unconditional gratitude for the consciousness of each person present, for I know that it is by all of us coming together in spiritual community that we create this new understanding, this new thought, this deeper realization of who and whose we are. It is with great gratitude for this divine power that I just let go, knowing that God takes care of absolutely everything. And so from this place of gratitude, I release this word into that alchemy of love and law, knowing it is done even as I speak, knowing that this just is the way it is, and that the only thing that is changing by my words is our perception of the universal and immutable truth. And so knowing that this is done, I just let it be, I let it go, I let it be so. Please join me in saying, and so it is. Now, sure. So this is the time where we get to share unconditionally with this community.